I went to art school in Hobart in 1966, and I was going to be an art teacher, but of course I was more interested in playing music. And in the course of being at art school, I met this American folk singer that was in Hobart at the time, named Bill Hicks. And he had an amazing collection of blues records, the likes of which we'd never heard before. As well as that, I met up with a harmonica player in Hobart, Ian Beecroft, who was studying at uni, and he had some Chicago blues albums that I'd never heard before. So that was a big influence on me. I was already very keenly interested in blues, though, because of that British beat invasion, and people like the Yardbirds and the Pretty Things and stuff who were doing their versions of a lot of American blues songs.
Chain's now in its 51st year. The first incarnation had Wendy Saddington as singer. Tell me about those days.
Well, I went to Perth to join the Beaten Tracks, who'd been in Melbourne for the Battle of the Bands. And we came back to Melbourne after a period of months, and we decided that we were quite a poppy band, and we decided it needed to be far more earthy and blues. So we got Wendy Saddington as a singer, and we went up the country to rehearse for a week, and we were trying to think of what we'd call the band. And so we were sitting around thinking, maybe we could call it the Purple Microdots, or we could call it these silly names as everyone was having in the sort of 60s. This was 68 by now. And Wendy was just sitting there listening to it all, and she just suddenly piped up, "Call it fucking Chain." And that was it. we became Chained. For a time with Michael Gudinski, we were the Chain, but we always preferred just being Chain.
And how did Matt Taylor then come on board?
Well, I played with Matt in 1967 in the Bay City Union, and when we went our own ways, Matt went off and played with some other people. I went off with Bobby and with actually Laurie Allen for a while, and then the Beaten Tracks. And after quite a few lineups of Chain, Warren went off. By this stage, Warren went off to join the Aztecs. Glyn Mason, who had joined Chain, went off to England. So that left Barry Sullivan, Barry Harvey, and myself as a trio. And we went up to live in Brisbane for a while. And whilst we were up there, I sort of felt like I wanted to concentrate more on guitar and less on singing at the time. So I wrote a letter to Matt, and Matt was trying to get in touch with me to get me to go to Melbourne to join his band. But we got on to Matt, and he ended up coming up to Brisbane and joining Chain. And then we wrote Black and Blue at our first rehearsal. And so that really, Matt joining the band really changed the sound.
Towards the Blues was the big album for Chain. What do you remember about those recording sessions?
Very little. No, we were sort of fairly out of it most of the time, and we weren't really quite getting anywhere. I don't know. We'd been in there a couple of days, and we weren't really happy with anything we'd got. And then I'm not sure whether someone turned up with a really good joint or what happened, but suddenly everything gelled, and we got the whole album done in a matter of hours. And so yeah, it was really quite exciting, because we knew that some of it was really good. Some of it I wasn't too sure about, but it turned out being a very successful album.
Two of a Kind. It was a double album. It has an interesting story. It was basically two albums put together.
Well, it was one side was a live version of How to Set Fire to an Elephant, which was an instrumental piece, and the other side was what we did in the studio with Mojo Beauford and Pee Wee Madison from Muddy Waters Band. That was done sort of in an evening, really.
Is there a particular Change track that you're really proud of?
I suppose Judgment would be one of them, definitely. Yeah, there's quite a few actually. When I think about it, there are some Chain things that I listen to and I go, oh, I'm not sure about what, and it's always to do with what I did in it. It's always I never sit there and think, oh, Matt could have sang that better. It's always me. I could have done that better. Or yeah.
A lot of pop and rock bands get to a certain age and they start sounding tired, but with the blues, it seems that you can play that forever and still sound relevant. What do you think that is?
Well, it's you can because you're singing about things that you experience and you're playing a very basic form of music. It's really easy to gel with other players, because I think that's one of the great things when you hear a really good blues act playing. They're great because they gel together. You know, they really fit together and play well. And I know that with Chain, we certainly keep sounding fairly fresh because we don't get to play with each other that much. Matt lives in Perth, Dirk lives in northern New South Wales, Trapper the drummer lives in Adelaide, and I'm here in Melbourne. So we only get together occasionally, and when we do, we make the most of it and have a great time.
I wanted to talk about some of the legends that you've come across in your time. Freddie King.
Yeah, Freddie King. I did a tour around the place with Freddie. I didn't really have much to do with him. He sort of tended to keep to himself, but got on really well and had quite a lot to do with Alexis Corner, who was also on the tour. And you know, Freddie King, Albert King. They're all. I found them sort of a bit standoffish, but B.B. King, on the other hand, was just wonderful. He was an absolute gentleman. And my favourite of all those guys that I toured with as a support act, you know, would probably have to be Muddy Waters. I did 2 tours around Australia with him, and he was just like everyone's grandfather. He was wonderful, just a great guy.
Bo Diddley, another one?
Yeah, he's a ripper. Yeah, Bo, I remember we backed him for one show in Perth once, and we had about 10 minutes rehearsal, and he just issued these very basic instructions, and then he came back on and we played for nearly 2 hours, and he ended up with half the audience on stage. It was mighty.
Well, what do you learn from guys like that?
From
the blues legends like that? Do you learn something from watching them?
Yeah, you can't help but learn something. You know, they've all got something to offer. I mean, a lot of it sort of, for a lot of it I always felt insecure because, you know, it was their music to begin with. But an interesting little thing with Bo Diddley, for instance, you know, when the first time I played and supported him, he was doing his bomp-a-domp-a-domp-a-domp-bomp beat, and I was playing along, and he stopped and he said, "Phil, I'm doing that. You play something different. You play something else." So that was really good, because it basically said, you know, I've got confidence in you to do something that'll fit, and so that was great. He was a great guy to work with, fabulous.
Do you think there is an Australian blues sound, and if so, what is it?
Well, I think there is to a degree. We call ourselves Oz Blues. Matt came up with that title. Matt Taylor is probably the epitome of it, in that he sings in a very Australian way. His lyrics, even though he might sing about the fact that he went to Texas, or the fact that he was in B.B. King's club in Memphis or something, that doesn't change the fact that he doesn't use a fake American accent or anything like that. And I know with myself, I've sort of come around. It took me ages to do this. It's got about 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I suddenly found that I really loved the sound of Australian place names, and so I started including them in my songs, and they really fit. The same as, like, in American blues songs, you get a mention of Dallas, Texas, or Angola, Mississippi, or whatever. Well, you can get great things out of Wollongong, or Wongol and Coomera. There's all these great sounding names in Australia.
Tell me about the guitar and amp combo you're using when Shane started, and what you'll be using, say, at the Yarraville Club coming up, for instance.
Well, back in the sort of 60s, I was using an amp to begin with that I built myself under my dad's supervision. Dad was a radio TV technician, and then I upgraded that to an M&R, and then we went to Strauss. By the time we were doing Chain and we had Black and Blue, I was using Lobby Lloyd's big Warrior amp with between 8 and 12 12s. So they're big, loud amps. I mean, it was something like 350 watts. And then sort of through the 70s and 80s, I used Randall amps for quite a while. And then from about 1988, I became a Fender Australia artist. And I've been using Fender amps ever since. I've got a couple here. The one I'll be using at the Yarraville Club is actually a little Fender Rumble bass amp that I run guitar through 112. So we've gone from these really big amps down to very small amps, which is absolutely necessary for a band like Chain, because otherwise Matt's harmonica will have to be so loud it just takes your head off on stage through the foldback. So yeah, we're using pretty small gear now.
Yeah. And your guitars through the years?
I'm almost exclusively Strat. I've had an Eric Clapton model Strat since 1988. I've got a Mexican Powerhouse Strat that I use for slide. I've got a little Gretsch cheapie over there, and I haven't started using this, but Chris Fennon and Jeff Lang got together, and it was my idea originally, but I wasn't getting round to doing it. So they had this cheap Jaguar cut up, just like Lobby Lloyd's guitar was in the late 60s. Except on Lobby's, I had painted Buddy Guy, Otis Rush, B.B. King, and that in enamel paints all across it. So I haven't got round to doing that yet, but it's just the headstock cut off, and it's just basically as a great thanks, as a dedication to Lobby, because Lobby was really my biggest direct influence back in the 60s.
Maton honoured you with a signature guitar.
Yeah.
In the 70s. How did that come about?
I went out and saw Focus, that Dutch band Focus, with Jan Akkerman on guitar, and he was playing what looked to me to be like a Les Paul, but it seemed to be bigger. And I really loved the sound he got out of it anyway. And I went into Brash's to inquire about it, and got talking with Frank Hinton, who was in charge of the music department. And Frank suggested that we go to Mayton and take my ideas of what I'd like in a guitar to them. So we did, and I was trying to sort of get a semi-solid guitar, so that's why it had the sound chambers in it, to lessen the weight, and also give it a little bit of acoustic quality, but not enough for it to feed back. And so yeah, we went ahead and did that, and made a prototype, and then it went into production. And it's actually sitting around the corner in there. Now it's now bright red with two P90 pickups, and it's my son. I gave it to my son for his 21st.
What do you look for in an acoustic guitar? What are the most important elements?
That sort of depends on the guitar, really. For instance, probably my favourite acoustic guitar, which I don't have one of, is a Martin OM28. There was a guy, a surfer in Bali, that had one, and it was just divine. It was beautiful. Had a lovely V-shaped neck on it. It was absolutely sensational. But as I said, I'm a Fender artist, so my main acoustic is this lovely little Fender Paramount series. It doesn't have a big bottom end, but that's actually preferable for a stage guitar. Means you can not have so much trouble with feedback, which of course can be a problem with acoustic guitars. And then I've got other guitars. I've got a mirror book over there made by a fellow used to be from Brisbane. He's now living somewhere in Thailand, I believe. Yeah, so I look for I look for a rich stringiness and really good sustain. That's what I love the sound of an acoustic guitar when it's beautifully in tune and it's got great sustain. There's just a magic quality about it that I love, and I very aware that some acoustic guitars can sound great acoustically, but they don't amplify well, and sometimes vice versa.
You've got the gig at the Yarraville Club coming up on March 9. What can people expect going along to that?
Well, we'll be playing. We naturally play the old hits. We have to, or we'll get tarred and feathered. So you're bound to hear Judgment, Black and Blue. I remember When I Was Young, which of course was actually a single for Matt. Chain played on it, but it was actually came out as Matt Taylor. And then we always have to play our version of 3220. And then there's the whole mix of other things off our albums like Sweet Honey. We don't really do anything from the Two of a Kind period. Everything we do is from the times where Matt and I worked together, which was a considerable amount of stuff. So we do bits and pieces off Oz Blues, and always do some sort of a dedication to the old blues guys, John Lee Hooker or Muddy Waters. But we have a lot of fun, and I'm surprised actually how energetic we are. considering our ages. It's quite amusing.
How would you like Chain to be remembered?
Oh, just as a really good fun, entertaining band, and you know, I know that you know, we've sort of had quite an influence in our own way on music, and that's really that's very humbling. But apart from that, I'd like Chain to be remembered as just good a bunch of old boys or something.
Phil Madding, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Greg.